So what we'll do in future is actually have that as NetApp, and then you literally just hit that transition button.
Yeah.
So, I am welcome to a live streamed Arrow Bandwidth, and I'm here with Roy McBride of our technical community, and we're here to talk about NetApp and all the good things they've done.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, we're just kind of wrapping up after today's Partner Academy. We've had some good sessions, some nice conversations, and I'm sorry if you hear them, but they're actually breaking down the stand behind us, and we thought we should actually give you a bit of a recap on what we've done today. So I think the big thing was that we took away the idea that NetApp now is more of a portfolio company.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I must admit, from the piece we did on the HCI Council, you know, on the HCI bit where we sit down, you know, it's become evident. I mean, I was the question asker, and I was being a little bit.
Well, I don't think you were being. I think you were asking questions that partners really want the answers to. You know, there's no softballs in there. I think you asked the ones that people wanted to know about. You know, the question around price is always going to be one that people are going to ask, and also, what is the technology going to do to me over buying another branded server?
Yeah, and also because, you know, this is quite a new entry for NetApp into this market, because obviously you've always had a very strong portfolio of storage products. You went through, you know, a bit of a lull late to the market with Flash, didn't really have a clear strategy around big data, and now you've absolutely just come out of that doldrum and are back at the top, you know, back where you were maybe 5 years ago when NetApp was the storage to have. Indeed.
Yeah, I think we went through OS reinvention, and we were kind of inwardly focused, and I think that kind of hurt NetApp. They took their eye off the ball. They probably didn't listen to what customers were telling them is what they need, and are really only starting to get back there. I think, you know, George Kurian's done huge amounts within the company. As we heard today, you know, look at the share prices, how it's changed over the last 12 months.
Yep.
And we can see as well from our customers, they're more positive about working with NetApp now. You know, the message of leading with cloud is a huge one.
Yeah. No, I must admit, I've been really impressed, and as I said, you know, when we were having our panel debate, I obviously see the entire global vendor portfolio. I see EMC, and Pure, and Infinidat, and all the crazy vendors we've got across the world. And I must admit, if you look at the NetApp story from start to finish, and then essentially how they combine all the products together, that's pretty unique. And so the biggest thing for me at the moment, and I think the biggest thing is that literally that on-prem to cloud consistent approach. I love the fact that you've got that underpinning piece of the data fabric.
Yep.
So, and also being the only vendor that has the relationship and the deep relationships that NetApp have with the hyperscalers now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the foundation. You know, when the data fabric was launched, probably 4.5 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, it was kind of seen as a strategy, but it is actually a reality now. Yeah. You know, we're seeing lots of people utilizing it, you know, and using the different parts of the portfolio as and when during that information lifecycle. You know, whether it be DevOps in the cloud to retiring it on premises. You know, that's beautiful, and that's great for people that want to buy a product that meets their needs,
well,
rather
they
than
buy a solution.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the nicest thing. And I must admit, when I first saw Data Fabric, I honestly looked at it and thought I didn't understand it, because back then it was very much there was the fast product, and I was like, where's it going? But actually, as NetApp has become, as you rightly describe it, a portfolio company, having that consistent underpinning to be able to make data consistently available and single pane of glass across HCI, across converged infrastructure, across the cloud.
Yep.
That's pretty darn impressive, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that's quite unique.
Yes, it is. It is unique, and it's been hard work. There's been a lot of late nights and product development and retirements as well over the course of the years to get here. But it's coming to fruition, and you know, it started off as a vision, you know, and even some of us that were, you know, diehard, you know, blue NetApp fans were thinking, oh, I'm not too sure about this, and now when you sit back and look at it and go, yeah, you know, that's why these people are senior VPs and stuff in the company. They had that vision, and I've brought it to reality.
And the nice thing was they stuck by that vision.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned one name in particular, the sort of
George Kurian, yeah.
Who, you know, actually, when everyone sort of was not quite sure where he was going, stuck to his guns, was consistent, and it's paid off in spades, because NetApp are back at the top of the storage tree, as far as I know.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we heard today they're the number one flash vendor globally, the number one in the UK, and these things are just going to change for the better. We're seeing as well. You know, Adam talked about the growth. You know, we've seen a 12% year-on-year growth within the UK, compared to a 10% drop across the rest of storage platforms, and that's only going to come from having products that meet people's needs and meet their actual requirements today.
I'll tell you what, so going away from the strategy and into some of the technology pieces, so I was really impressed today to hear about the 30 terabyte hard drives. Now I appreciate they've been out for a while, but you know, you and I probably both remember the days of 72.6 gig SAS drives, and having bloody hundreds of things to get the performance.
So last year we were talking about 15 terabyte SSDs. There were actually 15.3. Our rounding error was the biggest hard drive you could buy 2 years ago on the SSD market.
That is absolutely mental.
Yeah. And now we're at double that, and it's just growing with that. And you know, we're talking about these things in the artificial intelligence space, machine learning space. They're creating huge amounts of data. We need the drives to keep up with that creation. And we need the resilience, and I think Flash has gotten to that point where it's not only dense enough but resilient enough to be used in the data center now, and that's great for people that have huge amounts of data.
Yeah, and I must admit I've been really impressed with the fact that you can now consolidate so much into so little. You know, so essentially what was maybe 3 or 4 racks of just spinning disks.
Yeah.
You can get into a shelf.
Yeah, I mean the
same performance.
The A800 NVMe end-to-end. You know, you can get inside that chassis, you can get 48 drives, and you can get them in 30 terabyte flavors, which gives you roughly 2 petabytes of capacity.
Usable. Because I think one of the other things that people don't understand is that 30 terabytes. That's not compressed. That's raw.
That's the raw drive size. Yeah.
And unlike back in the day when you'd apply like a RAID 5 or a RAID 0, you would lose substantial amounts, or RAID 1, you'd lose substantial amounts of disk to give you the performance or the resiliency you wanted. Now with compression and deduplication, we're talking about sort of essentially taking the raw drive. And what factor are we increasing it by with the software layer?
Well, I mean, NetApp have used so many different things now to give you storage efficiencies from you know, whenever you power the box on, whether that be things like dedupe and compression, you know, and thin provisioning back in the day, you know, is still one we talk about. But you've got things as well like inline compression, inline compaction. You know, if it's not a 4K block.
Compaction, what's that?
So if a block is coming into the system, or a number of blocks are coming in, they're not 4K, which is what we write down to drive. We can actually put 2 of those together, or 4 of those if they're like 1K in size, and write them all down in one, rather than having to pad them out with zeros, which we used to have to do because of the way. And all of this happens now in the memory of the box, so it's still the fastest, you know, thing out there, and it gives us great performance then from the box.
Because I still remember the first ever compression solution. It was I can't remember the name of it now, Storewise, I think, about many years ago, and it was horrendous. It was like sort of this out of band sort of. You know, they were like, oh, you could put it in band, but the lag and it was just a nightmare. And everyone, I think that sort of tainted the inline compression market.
It was seen as, you do it on your disaster or your archive, actually, is where you would do it. You know, and you would probably tear it off to that to compress it. But now we're talking about doing that inline, and you know, not only that, but you know, half a dozen other things, and we're still seeing, you know, microsecond, you know, one microsecond, 0.1 of a microsecond response time.
Blimey.
You know, these are you know, near infinite numbers, you know, for people to get a head round, and I think NetApp have you know, kicked down some doors and done a lot with that number. I mean, you look at SPC1 figures, we're sitting on best price per performance out there at the moment.
Well, it makes me interested. It sort of makes me laugh, because if we look maybe a couple of years ago, when some of the vendors, not mentioning your names, but they were bringing out dedicated hardware solutions to get to the sort of levels of performance and capacity that we're seeing from just, you know, without meaning to belittle it, like a relatively bog standard storage array now, or at least a storage chassis. You know, and I just find that mind blowing that actually Joe Bloggs can go and buy, without a huge amount of understanding, a petabyte of storage, implement it, plug it into a couple of servers, and use it. You know, this was such a fantastically specialist area only a year ago.
Yeah, it was corner case, it was niche. Well, now we're kind of mainstream, and you know, we've also talked about the ability to buy this from the cloud. You know, we looked at a customer earlier who was spending roughly 50% of their budget on AWS, was just covering their storage costs. Yet by implementing ONTAP, Cloud Volume ONTAP, that is, they were able to reduce that capacity down and save the majority of that capacity through things like Flex Clone and so on and so forth to actually increase their test and dev and rollout time for their application.
And that's unbelievable, because if you think honestly about the amount of simplification that's gone into all of this, it's mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. And from someone who is a techie, who has, you know, used to do this for a job back in the day, you know, installing storage arrays and things, the complexity and I suppose, question for you, what has this done to the storage administrator? Because I mean, that used to be a job and a team and an entire division inside of the IT business, was the storage team managing SAN fabrics, managing storage arrays, managing performance, various different toolings. What's happened to that role?
Well, the role has probably, I would say, it evolved. No longer are they probably doing just that. I mean, I used to always bill myself as a jack of all trades, and I think it now gives them the chance to actually, you know, look at doing things with, say, containers. You know, let's look at how to modernize our infrastructure. NetApp have a great program called Trident, because of our 3 platforms, which allows you to provide persistent storage across things like Docker and Kubernetes. You know, these are things that these storage administrators can now look at, rather than worrying about, you know, which of my SAN hosts is up or down. You know, do I have 2 gig or 4 gig SAN fiber channel running in that site? How's my replication working? You know, it frees them up to look at those high-end jobs that they've always wanted to do, but maybe didn't have the time.
So one of the platforms we've not really touched on yet, and I think one of the ones that I certainly didn't really have a huge amount of understanding about until recently, is NetApp Select. So can you explain a little bit about what that actually is?
Select is the software-only version that runs on your hypervisor. So you can get a 1-node, a 2-node, or a 4-node system, depending on the sort of resiliency you want. And this is great for those sort of small branch offices that may be running, you know, a small instance of VMware, and they want the look and feel of NetApp, but they don't want to maybe invest in hardware, or they don't have anybody out there that has the hardware skills or the ONTAP skills to manage it. And they can be managed then from within VMware. It can be spun up, spun down. It you know, uses fault tolerance in there, and all of these things that if you want. And gives you the benefit then of replicating it maybe back to a local data center. It's also great for things like proof of concept. If you've decided that you maybe want to go down the NetApp route and you're thinking, will it work with my application or my product, or, you know, this is a really great idea, I'd like to see if I can flex clone out this information. ONTAP Select's a great way to dip your toe into the water. And then if it doesn't give you the performance, you can either look to implement maybe an SSD underlying disk architecture, or you could move over to one of the engineered platforms. Or maybe you want to replicate it up into the cloud. Because it's ONTAP, it's the same OS, it uses the same mirroring technology, SnapMirror, and you can replicate it up into, say, AWS or Azure and carry on working there seamlessly.
So this literally gives you that absolute flexibility, so you can have a physical hypervisor, you can have an HCI solution, you can have a conversion infrastructure, you can use it in the cloud, or you can have the software-defined version.
Yeah, all running the same OS, and all, well, not all the OS, but it's all running, you know, ONTAP and SnapMirror that can move the data around.
So essentially, it can leverage the data fabric methodology to continue, make that consistently across the board.
Yeah, I mean, with the HCI platform now, you can, during the deployment phase, you can decide if you want to deploy an ONTAP Select instance to run on that as well. So that gives you what we're calling VNAS to run on top of your infrastructure, whilst you would get the SAN implementation from the, in essence, Element OS nodes that were providing storage back to the overall cluster.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you ever so much for coming on. Great day.
I think it has been, yeah. It's been great, yeah. There's plenty of coffee cups being tidied away behind us, as you can hear.
Yeah. No, but great day, really, really successful. I think the partner's got a huge amount out of it. I certainly always learn things when I come to these. So thank you very much.
No problem. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
See you next year.
Thank you.
Cheers.